say thanks for coming to this rally organised by All Under One Banner for a nuclear-free Scotland and independence. Hey, let's say a few slogans. Bairns not bombs, everybody. Bairns not bombs. Bairns not bombs. Bairns not bombs. Bombs. Another one for you. Welfare and education, not trident and deportation. Welfare and education, not trident and deportation. Welfare and education, not trident and deportation. Okay, I'll give it a rest there. I'll give it a rest. Okay, first of all, I want to thank everybody for turning up today and showing patience before the rally started. That's partly due to the fact that the bus was delayed, but they're here now, so it's great that you've all turned up. This is the first rally by All Under One Banner at Faslane. Hopefully it won't be our last and we'll have others in the future. But we'd also like to say a word of thanks to Scottish CND, who are supporting the rally and speaking today, to the SNP CND group, who are supporting the rally and speaking today, and to Now Scotland for supporting the rally, organising the buses and speaking today. So a big hand for all these organisations that have supported the demonstration. First speaker we've got today is Isabel Lindsay from CND. As you know, CND go back to the 60s, to 1961, when they started the demonstrations at that time against the Polaris nuclear weapons. And so it's good, I think, that there's a link back to that original group of people who started the fight against nuclear weapons. And there's a bit of a departure for All Under One Banner to have a demonstration around something like nuclear weapons. And I want to say a couple of words about that. We've normally demonstrated around the question of independence, and this is also about independence. It's not been buried here, but it's also about the issue of nuclear weapons. And there's really, I want to highlight two reasons for it. One is the sighting of these nuclear weapons on the Clyde, close to a big conurbation in Glasgow, is a disgrace. These are weapons of mass destruction. They are indiscriminate. And it's a disgrace that they're sighted here in the west of Scotland. And I'm for, and we're all for, the end of nuclear weapons, full stop. But we also want Scotland to be rid of them as well. That's the second reason. This is about democracy. The Scottish government do not support nuclear weapons in Scotland. The mass of the population are opposed to it. They're imposed here by the British state. And it's one of the reasons why we want independence. This goes to the heart of the type of Scotland that we want. A Scotland that's open, that's inclusive, that's peace-loving, that opposes war, that opposes imperialism. So, it's a departure, but I think it's an important one, to put a message out about the type of country we want when we become independent. Okay, so I think I've said enough. So the first speaker is going to be Isabel Lindsay from CND. I think Lynn Jameson from CND is going to say a few words along with that. On you go, Lynn.
This over here is the face of the British state. 180 nuclear bombs. Just imagine the utter horror and devastation that could involve for so many millions throughout the world. But that's not enough for the British government, because they have just announced that they're going to be increasing the warheads to 240, despite the fact that this is a denial of what they signed up to, the limited amount they signed up to in the Non-Proliferation Treaty. So you have to say why. We know it is nothing whatsoever to do with our safety or our security. It is everything to do with projecting the image as they see it and the power of the British state, because they are still under the illusion that they are major players in the international scene, and this is the main thing they have to hold on to convince themselves that that is still the case. But it has always been the case. When we go back to the Attlee government in 1946, took the decision in secret to start the development of the British bomb. It was Ernest Bevin, the Foreign Secretary at the time, said, we've got to have a British bomb and we'll have a big Union Jack all over it. I think that tells us what this is about. And it is about that projection of state power, that illusion of state power, because it is an illusion, because it isn't the British state. It is very much the United States who are in control here. The UK is totally dependent on the US for their missile system. And this goes way back to before 61 to 60 and just before that, because Britain had nuclear warheads, but they had a series of failed delivery systems. So they had to go, Macmillan had to go cap in hand to the Americans and say, please, 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 can we have your Polaris? And the American response was, yes, possibly, but we want the Holy Loch base. Now, Britain, in the form of Harold Macmillan, pleaded and pleaded with them, please have Loch Linnhe instead, because there are just a few easy-to-handle Highlanders up there. We might have big, big problems with Glasgow, so there you are. At least that was recognised. The Americans were absolutely certain they wanted the Holy Loch, and the Holy Loch it had to be, and Britain did get its leased Polaris submarine, and now its leased Trident missile system, and the Trident missile system that goes back regularly to the United States in order to be serviced, and I don't think anyone has any doubts at all for the targeting to be developed there and the control. So it is an illusion. It is an enormously expensive illusion. Now, we can be under no doubts whatsoever that in the negotiations for independence, everything will be done. Everything will be thrown at us. There will be threats, there will be blackmail in order to allow a Guantanamo on the Clyde to remain here. But this is why we have to be so prepared. We have to get people so committed. And let's understand, this is not technically a difficult thing to get rid of. There are processes, but Scottish CND, in its report, Disarming Trident, which you can access, which we produced during the referendum, to show the technical processes for getting rid of nuclear weapons here. And our report, Trident, Nowhere to Go, which showed how important what we do here in Scotland, in an independent Scotland, to get rid of this atrocity is something that will help the disarmament process internationally. Now, we do have just one glimmer of hope on the horizon, and that is the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, which is now an international treaty within the context of the United Nations. Now, we have got political parties in Scotland who are agreed to sign up to this as soon as we get independence, and that would require the removal of this with United Nations backing within that context. So that's the glimmer of hope. The negative side is that the existing nuclear powers aren't showing any interest in seriously taking steps towards disarmament. On the contrary, they're speeding up under pressure from big corporate defence interests. They are speeding up the investment and the new developments. So we've got something to look at and to have hope for, and we have some things in which it's hard not to feel a lot of despair. While one hope is that we get independence, and that provides us with a route which we do not currently have in the context of UK politics. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lynn Jimison. I'm chair of Scottish CND. Don't worry, I'm not going to give you another speech to follow up Isabel's excellent contribution. I'm just inviting you all to come here again on the 26th of September, when Scottish CND is organising a die-in here. The 26th is a Sunday. It's, I think, just after you will be having a big rally in Edinburgh. It's at 3 o'clock, so if you could come here for 2, and we're making the link, not just with independence, but with climate change. So nuclear weapons and climate change are inextricably linked. If you can't figure that out, read some of our literature around it. On the 26th at 3 o'clock, we are trying to have a die-in to ask people to die in for peace and climate justice here, and to make the connection with the destruction of the environment that nuclear weapons do, not just by being used, but just by being here, by the discharges these submarines make into the Gairloch right now, that are putting pollution, including nuclear pollution, into the sea and is harmful to the marine environment. So we're asking people to come, if you can, carrying pictures of marine animals or dressed as marine animals or just as yourself, but come here for a die-in and a spectacle at Faslane on the 26th of September for 3 o'clock. Thank you.
I'd just like to introduce Tony Giuliano, Giuliani, SNP candidate, is going to give you a few words.
Thank you very much. Former SNP candidate. It's delighted to see all of you here today, because we do need to say it loudly and clearly that there is no moral case for Trident. There is no economic case for Trident, and there is no military case for Trident. It is the norm in the world to be nuclear free. It is the exception to the rule to possess nuclear weapons. And yet, as we've heard from Isabel Lindsay and CND, the UK government behind us is increasing the number of nuclear weapons on the Clyde. What message does that send to countries across the world? How can we expect nations to disarm or not to arm if we send the message that the only way that we can protect our security is to possess nuclear weapons? Trident, of course, are yesterday's weapons, and even then they failed to protect and they failed to deter a single conflict. They are completely redundant in today's world. Cyber attacks can't be deterred by Trident. Terrorism can't be deterred by Trident. Future pandemics can't be deterred by Trident. The climate emergency can't be deterred by Trident. These are the global issues that we face, and nuclear weapons play no role whatsoever in ensuring that we have a resilient state, a resilient country. And you know, I hear the likes of the UK Chancellor, the billionaire UK Chancellor, say that we can't afford the £20 uplift to universal credit. Well, let me offer up a suggestion. Stop funding redundant nuclear weapons and start investing in the people of our country who need it most. And as for Scottish Labour, you know, the deputy leader of the Scottish Labour Party, a great defender of weapons of mass destruction, she describes our opposition to nuclear weapons as gesture politics. Well, I don't know about you, but I call it principled politics, ethical politics, compassionate politics, rational politics. Gesture politics is when you waste billions on a status symbol that will never be used, purely to give the impression that the UK still has influence on the world stage. That, my friends, is gesture politics. And talking of world stage, I have been reflecting on the horror that is unfolding as we speak in Afghanistan. And we need to do everything we can to bring as many people as possible to safety. But what is happening in Afghanistan is not only a shameful betrayal, it is the biggest foreign and defence policy failure of recent times. And the British state must reflect and act upon those failures. I believe independence gives Scotland the opportunity to build an alternative foreign and defence policy that moves away from the imperial bluster of the British state, which has failed time and time again. A foreign policy that respects international law, a foreign policy that respects human rights, that builds a compassionate asylum system, a Scotland that reprioritises our conventional defence, which has been cut to the bone by this UK government to pay for Trident. So I say this: in the first 100 days of independence, we must kickstart the process to remove these unlawful weapons from our soil. And we will ensure that Faslane thrives as a fit-for-purpose, non-nuclear base, retaining the jobs and the talent that already exist to support the communities of this area and beyond. Because I'm sick to death of hearing from the likes of Scottish Labour and the local MSP that we would close this base. Absolutely not. We will ensure that the talent remains, but we will have no nuclear weapons on our soil. With independence, we'll be able to shift the debate on Trident. It won't any longer be about its relocation or about its renewal. It will be about getting rid of it once and for all. That's what independence will do. So let me conclude by just sending a heartfelt message to the Yes Movement, all of the Yes Movement. Now is the time for us to unite, to work together, as we did in 2014. That's why I'm here representing the SNP today, and I know that there are many speakers representing lots of different organisations and groups, but now is the time for us to unite, as we did then, to create the nuclear-free independent Scotland we know is possible, and it's up to us to make that happen. Thank you very much.
I'd just like to introduce Jerry Cairns, speaking in a personal capacity, obviously about what we all know.
Sisters and brothers, thank you very much for the invitation to be here this afternoon. Our opponents like to disparage what we're about. They disparage us by saying it's a constitutional issue. You know, why do we waste time on constitutional questions? It's no such thing. What we are about and why we are still here is because there is a great question that has been unanswered since 1707, and that is the great
national question, as it was called in the 19th century. And there's only one answer to that question. It's not devolution, it's not home rule, it's not federalism. It's as the Honourable Rory Erskine of Mar said, it's the resumption of Scotland's national independence. That is the key and the only answer to that national question. But there's more to that, because as James Connolly, the Edinburgh-born socialist and Irish Republican, and John Maclean understood as well, that the national question is linked to the social question. The two are two sides of that one coin. Because the thing is, brothers and sisters, independence could be the most exciting thing, or it could be a damp squib. A damp squib where flags come down, Prince Charles officially announces that the clock's been turned back to 1603. That's not my vision of an independent Scotland. And I'm here to give a wee plug for my book on Rory Erskine of Mar, because he actually challenged the Home Rulers. Because Scottish nationalism was stuck in a dead end that was about home rule and devolution, relying on the Liberal and Labour parties to deliver something that they could never deliver. The only ones that can deliver are the people of Scotland themselves. So for the great changes that we want to see in this country, to get rid of those weapons of mass destruction, to give Scotland a say in matters of war and peace, to turn Scotland upside down in terms of our society, solve the land question once and for all, and protect our indigenous languages of Gaelic and Scots. There's only one way to do that, and that is the resumption of our national independence. And a good starting point in terms of doing something different is that when people land at Glasgow or Aberdeen or Inverness airports, when they come off the boat at Greenock or Leith, or when they drive over the border, they will see a sign that will be quite visionary, and a starter for 10 for the country we want to build. Farcha de Foblach na Halapa. Welcome to the Republic of Scotland. Thank you, sisters and brothers.
Kid Mohamed, oh, here he is, cool, brilliant. Hi, just to say to everybody, the next speaker is Mohamed Asif, who is here on behalf of the Afghan Human Rights Campaign, and also a campaigner against war. Now, we've heard the disaster of Afghanistan and what's happened in Afghanistan and what's going on there. And Mohamed could talk about that from personal experience. And it's good to hear that the Scottish Government and the SNP are opposed to what's happened there. But people should remember, and it's why it's important we need to campaign. At the time the troops went in, the Scottish National Party supported that when they went into Afghanistan. So we have to remember that. It's good that they've taken a critical position now, but it's a reason why we need to campaign and keep on the streets. Mohamed, thank you.
Thank you, brothers and sisters. I remember many of my friends here in the year 2001 when we started to campaign against the war criminal Tony Blair in Glasgow. When the war in Afghanistan happened, we were told by Tony Blair personally and George W. Bush that they will not walk away from us. This is his exact words. They will not abandon us. 20 years later, what Britain and America did was replace Taliban with Taliban. You know, you have seen the miseries of Afghans, and when you see Boris going around, England, and, meeting soldiers and others, I want Boris to meet the children of Scottish soldiers who went to Afghanistan. I want Boris to meet the 200,000 or 300,000 Afghans who were vanished with these weapons behind us. I want Boris and others that what are you going to tell them? What is your answer? Brothers and sisters, my heart really bleeds for Afghanistan. And it is when we were saying that we need a political solution in Afghanistan, we were told by the war criminal Tony Blair and others that no, we have to remove the Taliban, they're a terrorist. Let me tell this, that there's no doubt the Taliban are terrorists, no doubt about it. They're a bunch of barbaric killers and vicious human beings, but who empowered them? Think about this. When we were fighting the USSR in the 80s, Trust me, Britain and America train Bin Laden soldiers in their army, or the Mujahideen, or the British and American give them a holy title, the holy warriors. But when they achieve fighting the Russian or the Red Army, then suddenly the holy warriors or the pious people become the terrorists. Some of their soldiers were trained in Scotland in the 80s, in England, in America, and many other Western countries. But when the Red Army was defeated, with the loss of 1.5 million Afghans in Afghanistan, fighting your war, the Cold War, remember? And then you abandon Afghanistan, with your friends whom you call terrorists later on. Bin Laden and others who were recruited from the 80s. I tell you this, I remember a refugee camp in Pakistan when Ronald Reagan advisor visited that refugee camp, and he was chanting Allahu Akbar, God is great, with the Afghans in the refugee camp. He went to the border with the Afghan refugees and he said, that's your land. Your land is occupied by infidels. Reclaim your land. As that Brzezinski, the security advisor to Ronald Reagan, and he was a very pious Muslim, as though he was really a good Muslim. But he was telling us that God is with us and reclaim your land. Brothers and sisters, when we see the scenes in Afghanistan, coming out of Afghanistan, it's heartbreaking. The Taliban, it's impossible for Taliban to occupy a country within a week or 9 days. But this was a pre-planned strategy by Boris and others, to collapse Afghanistan and go into, further chaos. Brothers and sisters, in the past 20 years, nearly 180,000 innocent Afghans killed. 72,000 Afghan security forces killed, 400 or 500 British soldiers, including the Scottish kids. My sympathy and condolences with their parents and families. But I think if I'm the family of a Scottish soldier right now, I will be suing Boris in the MOD. Because you send my children to fight the terrorists, and the same terrorists you empowered them 10 days ago. Brothers and sisters, these are not needed, as the previous speaker said. There's a lot of poverty in the world. In Afghanistan, 22 million right now, according to United Nations, do not have food. And we have these weapons of mass destructions. I don't know, the maintenance bill is, I think, few hundred billion every year. And this is only killing innocent citizens. When we were told that they will liberate Afghanistan and liberate the women of Afghanistan, I laugh. Right now, if you tell any Afghans, I have the pictures in the messages, the screaming, the cries, if you want I can play it in my language, that tell your Western friends that you betrayers and you sold us, you tied our hands and you threw us in the sea. If you listen to their voices and their screams, probably, Kabul is nothing. There's like maybe 100,000 people gathering. When you have these guilty feelings, Boris and others, that we have failed in Afghanistan, let's take 20,000 Afghans. So that can justify their failures in Afghanistan. Brothers and sisters, the biggest non-nuclear weapons was dropped in Afghanistan. And it killed innocent people. They call it the mother of all bombs, or the mother of Americans, I don't know what you call it. And many weapons from this part of the world shifted to Afghanistan. Killed innocent women and children in dawn raids, in night raids, and other aerial bombings. Hundreds of thousands innocent Afghans killed by American and British bombings, by the Taliban, by the Islamic State, by the Afghan security forces. But just last week, the world washed their hands from Afghans. And now, if you listen to the UK Defense Chief, it is a dirty game. Politics is very dirty, but I'm glad there are a few politicians who are still clean. When the defense chief came on Sky Television and Kay Burley asked him, did the enemy, and he jumped in, oh, please don't call the Taliban our enemy. They're not our enemy. They're changed. I haven't seen a Taliban leader growing a tail or extra ears. They're the same barbaric killers who kill us before 9/11. Because before 9/11, it wasn't your interest, because they were only killing the Afghans, the Afghan children, our civilization, our culture. But when 9/11 happened, suddenly we realized that there is a group called Taliban. You can Google yourself. A Mexican journalist asking George W. Bush when he was running for presidential, when he was a candidate for the US presidency, he asked him if he knew Taliban. He thought the Taliban were a musician and they are a band of musicians. This is his answer. You can Google and see it. When he was asked where Chechnya was, he didn't know where Chechnya was. And he told the journalist, that's not my job. It's your job to know where which country is. So that is the sort of politicians. When millions of people were marching against the Iraq war, and I was myself with many of my colleagues here in the crowd, when we were telling the war criminal Tony Blair and others that the war in Iraq is illegal, we were told by the Sun newspapers in the crops, in the rubbish, in the garbage, that we are 45 minutes away from a nuclear attack by Saddam Hussein. When everybody, the UN and everybody was saying this is an illegal war, and Tony Blair killed, along with George W. Bush and others, 1 million Iraqis. They have blood on their hands, brothers and sisters. You know, I'm standing here, you know, when I speak, I get a lot of problems personally. Recently, I traveled and I was stopped at the airport under the Terrorism Act, and they told me, you know, we're stopping you because under this legislation. I must be the laziest terrorist on earth, you know, the very lazy terrorist on earth, that I live in Scotland for 21 years or 21 and a half years, that I haven't done anything for the terrorists. You know, that proves you. Imagine if you are working for your boss and you don't turn up without letting your boss, do you really think you will survive in your job? You know, that's the sort of punishment that when we speak against the war in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Libya, in Yemen, where these weapons in Yemen, you know what is happening in Yemen. You know, children and women, most of the victims there are killed by these weapons exported from here, and they are killed. You know, when we raise our voices, you know, that Saudi Arabia is killing Yemenis, you know, we are told, you know, we're terrorist sympathizers. You know, they're your friends. Saudi is a terrorist regime, which is your friend. You dine with them, you wine with them, you know, you have parties with them. You were the first after 9/11 to take out their families and give them safe passage from America and Britain so people don't hurt them. So you are their friends. You know, you empower every rogue regime, every dictators, every warlords, every fascists and racists around the world, you empower them. When you are telling us that is your war and go and fight against the Red Army, you know, we were killed 1.5 million. 7 million Afghan become refugees. You know, probably about 7 more million across the world. But brothers and sisters, we have to come together. We have to fight for humanity, because this is not the solution. This is, you know, causing more killings, causing more destructions, and this has to stop. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Neil Mackay is going to give you a couple of tunes now. Then we'll have Bill Ramsey, I think. No, then we'll have Lorna McKinnon after that. Okay, take it away.
Hello everybody, I've got a few songs for you all. First up's John McLean March by Hamish Henderson, most of you should know.
Come on down and see him, he'll be your
Clyde. Come on, Jock and Jimmy, leave the crans on the muckle gantries. Great John McLean's coming home to the Clyde. Argyll Street and London roads, the route that we're marching. The lads frae the Brimalow, they're here to a man. Hey Neil, where's your drums? Your big heel and trichter, get your pipes made to march at the head of the clan. Hello, Pat Maloney, I knew you'd be here, son. The blue and the green, my lad, will wear side by side. For the Gorbals is his today, and Glasgow belongs to him. Great John McLean's coming home to the Clyde. It's forward to Glasgow Green, we'll march in good order. Well, grips the banners well, that boy isn't to blame. Hey, look, man, there's Johnny Moon, that him, and all lead next is me. Tag tens when he's speaking, or you'll mind what I said here in Glasgow City and the hill well beside. Oh, look, man, the scarlet's bonny. Here's to your heel and shonny. Great John McLean's coming home to the Clyde. A wheel when it's finished, I'm a walking to Springburn. Come home to your tea, John, we'll soon hae you fed. It's hard work this speaking, I'm sure he'll be tired tonight. I'll sleep on the Flairmac and gauge on the bed. The hill city's quiet now, it kens that he's resting. And hame wi' his Glasgow friends, the fame and their pride. Oh, the red will be won, my lad, and Scotland will rise again. For great John McLean has come home to the Clyde. Hey, Mac, did you see him as he come down the Gorgie? Or a war, the Lammerlaw, and north o' the Tay. New York man is coming, and the hill city's turning it. We're all sure he'll win back Glasgow today. Great John McLean's coming home to the Clyde. Oh, great John McLean's coming home to the Clyde. Thank you. I get two more, Bob. I get two more. No, I get two more. Right. So that was by Hamish Henderson. The next two are Jim McLean songs. Many will know Jim McLean, written a load of great songs. This one, the Scottish MP. I am a Scottish MP from a city grey and black. So I'll shut my mouth when I'm in the south, just in case they send me back. Now some folks work for Labour and some for the Tory class, but I work like hell for me, myself, and the rest kiss my kilt. Oh, I'm off to London in the morning, in Westminster I will be, and I'll leave behind my brains and mind and try for an MB. Oh, Scotland, dear Scotland, you have given me your trust, and if I make the grade to the Board of Trade, just guess first. I'll trade the lowlands for a peerage, give me an earldom for the Isles, and the whole damn lot could be easily bought with one of Lizzie's smiles. Oh, I'm off to London in the morn, in Westminster I will be, and I'll leave behind my brains and mind and try for an MB. I am a Scots home ruler at my English Queen's command, for my real birthright is to be a knight, and the rest can be Republican. So come wish it, Smith and Blackford, a Scottish Englishmen. Nationality for a Scots MP means tea at number 10. Oh, I'm off to London in the morn, in Westminster I will be, and I'll leave behind my brains and mind and try for an MD. Thank you. And one more, quick one. We didn't want Polaris. I'll learn one of those ones for this. You'll know this tune, and please sing along, okay? The USA are eating subs away, they're eating subs away, they're eating subs away. The USA are eating subs away, but we didn't want Polaris. Tell the Yanks to drop them down the stanks, to drop them down the stanks, to drop them down the stanks. Tell the Yanks to drop them down the stanks. We didn't want Polaris. The council ordering, they want their half a crown, they want their half a crown, they want their half a crown. The council ordering, they want their half a crown. We didn't want Polaris. The Harrys of the town are sailing to the noon, are sailing to the noon, are sailing to the noon. The Harrys of the town are sailing to the noon, but we didn't want Polaris. The suicide to hear them on the Clyde, to hear them on the Clyde, to hear them on the Clyde. It's suicide to hear them on the Clyde. We didn't want Polaris. The Clyde says no, you'll hate to shoot the crow, you'll hate to shoot the crow, you'll hate to shoot the crow. The Clyde says no, you'll hate to shoot the crow. We didn't want Polaris. Tap the hill dam show up the River Alamo, up the River Alamo, up the River Alamo. Tap the hill dam show up the River Alamo. We didn't want Polaris. Anchors away to Papa Kennedy, to Papa Kennedy, to Papa Kennedy. Oh, anchors away to Papa Kennedy. We didn't want Polaris. The USA is giving subs away, they're giving subs away, they're giving subs away. Oh, the USA are giving subs away, but we didn't want Polaris. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Neil. Okay, our next speaker is Bill Ramsey from the SNP CND group, one of the groups that support the demonstration today. In fact, the CND group and the SNP were the first, apart from ourselves. So welcome, Bill. Thank you for supporting the rally. Thank you.
Good afternoon, friends. I'm going to say a little bit what SNP CND is, and there's something I think that folk in other parties here, they could set up a similar organisation. SNP CND is actually an affiliate of Scottish CND. It's made up of people who have two membership cards.
a membership card of the Scottish National Party and a membership card of a Scottish CND. We are involved in the work of Scottish CND, of course, but in an SNP context, we organise seminars, we organise speakers, and we provide papers, and all of this can be found on our website. And I encourage all of the other parties, such as ALBA and the Greens, to set up similar organisations within their parties. So there should be an ALBA CND and there should be a Green CND. Indeed, I'm not quite sure why the Greens haven't got round to organising one yet, but there's a lot of Green people who are involved in Scottish CND anyway. But I think it would be useful if they did that. The most important piece of work that SNP CND are involved in at the moment is the development of taking forward anti-nuclear policy within the SNP. 3 years ago, we got a motion accepted unanimously on a roadmap for Trident removal. Now, that was based on the work, the peer-reviewed work actually, of the late John Ainslie, that many people here will know, and a great loss to the movement when John died a few years ago. And in September, the SNP are having its a September conference, and we have another motion on the SNP, when SNP parliamentarians, SNP government, when we become independent, indeed whatever colour that government is, to ratify the Treaty on the Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. That's a really crucial development and a crucial step. Now, it might sound a bit technical, diplomatic, but it really is quite important. The TPNW came into force in January of this year. Over 50 countries, in fact there's about 80, 90 countries have got the process rolling, so to speak, before then. 50 odd countries so far have ratified it, and many more will be doing so over the coming period. And when Scotland regains its sovereignty, one of the first things that a Scottish government should do, whatever the hue of the parliamentarians, they should be ratifying the Treaty for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, because it provides a framework, a diplomatic framework, to see these abominations removed from Scotland. And the key aspect of it is, when a future sovereign Scottish government ratifies the TPNW, it will have the various institutions of the United Nations to aid it in its negotiations to get these things going. Organisations like the International Atomic Energy Agency, which, as some of you will know, is the key organisation that has been involved in nuclear disarmament and removal at various countries at various times over the past 20 or 30 years. So that really is quite important. Now, some people, I'm not sure, some of them jokingly, some not so, suggest that we should rent this place out to the remaining UK government for a tidy sum. This is a bad idea, and there are 3 reasons why it's a bad idea. One, it's immoral, and it would send an awful message as to the standing, the moral compass of a new sovereign Scottish state. The second reason is that it would give succour to those who want to keep these weapons here after we become independent. Because one of the key things that people sometimes don't realise is, as you know, we've got 4 Vanguard-class nuclear submarines that carry the Trident missiles. And currently, right now, the nuclear agency, which is the agency that covers all nuclear weapons and such like in the UK under the UK government, they are building 2 replacements. They're going to build 4 in total. And one of them, the first of the Dreadnought class, is due to come here sometime in the next decade. Now, the sooner that the UK government get the message that we intend to see them removed, the sooner that they will take forward speedily their contingency plans to get them the hell out of here. Now, they're already working in those plans. They deny it, but they actually are. I attended a seminar of the Royal United Services Institute, the world's oldest military think tank, recently. And I put the question about contingency planning, because all navies do contingency planning for whatever units they've got, from the days of Nelson to today, right through it into the future. They do it. They'll deny it, but they do it. And if we give a picture, a clarity that they're going to go, then it will encourage them to speed up that process. But there's a final reason. When the people of England and the remaining UK, whatever manifestation that takes, when they realise that they're going from there, then they will start to have a serious discourse about what they're going to do with them. Because at the end of the day, they face a real challenge if they want to keep these abominations and their replacements, as Isabel pointed out. And it's important that they have clarity for us, from us in Scotland, so they can have an open discourse about what they're going to do about them. Because as we know, and although I personally believe that Brexit was an exercise in self-harm, when the middle classes of the UK, told the English working class that their vote didn't count in Brexit, they get very angry. And that anger of those people underpins to some extent the political chaos of the UK today. And you see the delusion over Afghanistan at the moment. The performance in the House of Commons, it was an absurdity. Various MPs with petted lips and more trying to appeal to a strategy that they knew was not going to work. And I'm not criticising the poor Afghan soldiers that died in their thousands over these years. They are ordinary soldiers, and I'm not going to criticise them in the least. But these MPs, particularly the MPs who were of field rank in Afghanistan, some of their job was to negotiate with the so-called Afghan politicians. And they knew, as the Afghan papers, and you were worth looking up, going to YouTube and looking at it, they knew that it was a house of cards. So the idea that they are shocked is a lie. They knew it. And if you look at the Afghan papers published by the Washington Post, of all papers, strangely enough, you will see that. And one final point, because it is really important about what's happening in Afghanistan today. Bob was correct when he criticised my party in its initial position on Afghanistan. But in 2007, and I'll never forget it, round about March, Sophie Raworth came on the news, and the number 3 item was that the UK public and the public of Scotland and the whole of the UK had flipped and they wanted out. That was in 2007. I tried to get a motion in the SNP conference agenda that year, didn't work. Tried the same with STUC, didn't work. But then things changed and we got the motion in 2 or 3 years later, and with STUC, because and I'm a trade unionist, my colleagues within the trade union movement, I remember the first Sea Lord made a speech aimed at the workers in the armaments industry. They said, you can maintain the vehicles and equipment in Iraq, or you can have the carriers. You can't have both. And I knew when he made that statement, there would be no problem getting a motion to get the hell out of Afghanistan at the STUC, and so it proved. But anyway, thank you for listening, folks, and all the best. And I hope to see you here at future events to see these things out of our country. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Now we have independence campaigner Denise Findlay up to have a few words. Thanks, Bill.
Hello. I was going to adjust this. So 2014, and one of our big major slogans was Bairns, not bombs. And that's what we were promising people. We were promising people what we spend our money on was bairns, not bombs. And people believed us. The working classes believed us. They marched, singing Flower of Scotland, pushing their bairns and their buggies to the polling stations to vote yes. Some of them were voting yes for the first time, voting for the first time in their lives. Some of them have never voted again. I was at the count and I seen the boxes from the most deprived areas of Dundee. They were full of yes votes. These boxes were boxes of hope. We'd sold them this hope. We sold them the hope of a better future for themselves and their bairns, and there would be no nuclear weapons in Scotland. What have we done since? What have we done to help the working class since? What have we done for these people that put their trust in the yes parties and the yes movement? Child poverty, 24%. 22% of absolute poverty. 68% in working households. That poverty is going to rise. 29% in 2023. By 2031, it's going to be a quite horrifying 38%. That's our bairns in our country, our rich country, with renewables, with oil and gas, with water, with an educated population, but we can't feed our bairns. Food bank use is up 80%. So what's our Parliament doing about this? What's the Scottish Parliament doing at this? They're begging Boris, begging Rishi Sunak for an extra few quid on universal credit. That's what they're doing about it. And what's our Scottish Parliament's equalities mechanisms? It's when did inequality stop being about poverty? When did equality become identity and not poverty? You know, we have equalities mechanisms that allow middle-class graduates to top lists, middle-class university graduates with degrees from private schools to top lists. These people are not disadvantaged, no matter how they ID. How many working class people do we have in the Scottish Parliament? Where's the equalities mechanism to get more working class men and women who came out of school of 16, who come from deprived areas? Where's those mechanisms to get them into Parliament? So while our Parliament muck around with middle-class virtue signalling, our people go hungry and our bairns go hungry, and we betrayed the people that stood up there, marched down to the polling station and put a yes for independence. And where are we on independence? Now is not the time. Since Theresa May told us now is not the time, our political leaders have been telling us now is not the time. Now is not the time if you're on a nice salary down in Westminster with your salary and your expenses. Now is not the time if you're on some list MSP for the Greens. Now is not the time because you're all comfortable. Now is not the time for you, but now is the time for Scotland. Now has always been the time. For the last 7 years, now has been the time. So what do we do? This is what we do. First, our political class is weak and corrupt, I have to say. I'm incredibly unimpressed by the MPs and the MSPs. We need to vote in people whose overriding decision is independence for Scotland. They have to stand on a manifesto of independence for Scotland. Once they're voted in, they declare independence, open negotiations with Westminster, and invite other countries to recognise us. The government have made it too difficult. There is no such thing as an illegal way to independence. There's no such thing as a gold standard to get independence. All you need to get independence is a democratic vote of a sovereign people, which they are. And this government is telling us, our government, our Scottish government, is telling us we are not sovereignty. If they believed we were sovereign, they wouldn't be asking Boris Johnson for anything. They would be telling Boris Johnson. And it's time they started to walk their talk. We are sovereign. We don't need permission from any Westminster government. If we want independence, we will vote for independence and we will open the independence negotiations and we will be independent, because all their scare stories, seriously, you know, Scotland is never, ever going to be a pariah state. If we want to be independent, the world will recognise us. So, that's it. Stop betraying the working class. Get more working class voices into Parliament. Stop begging Boris Johnson for stuff, because it's not in his gift, it's our gift, it's our decision, it's our country, it's our resources, it's our people, it's up to us what we want to do. So get rid of Trident while you're at it.
Thanks. Thanks very much to Denise Findlay. And now we're bringing on Brenda Eadie for the campaigner for fair pay for the NHS and to protect the NHS. Thanks, Brenda.
Can I lower this a wee bit? Oh, sorry. So, some of you may already know, my name's Brenda and I have been actively fighting for the NHS grassroots campaign as an organiser. We started this campaign last year and it originally started because other public sectors were awarded for their efforts during the pandemic, and us workers who were on the front line, hands-on, risking our lives every day, did not. We've been here to try and protect it from lighting the pockets of the capitalists, namely Westminster. But that's all changed. Our fight has now changed. We're now campaigning for the survival of the NHS and for the survival of our jobs. It's being privatised even as I speak. But all the big fat cats lining up, waiting to increase their bank balance on the back of our healthcare service. And I say our healthcare service because it is our healthcare service. We pay for that in our taxes. It is not theirs to sell. It is not theirs to profit from. And all that's going to do is bring death. That government are going to have blood in their hands, and it's blood of death of the people. There's already so much poverty in our country. Privatisation is only going to add to that. Heart patients unable to afford their medications on a monthly basis or their hospital visits or stays. Diabetics unable to access their life-saving insulin. Cancer patients unable to afford their life-saving treatments. It is, as I say, blood in the hands of the government. They get richer as we get sicker and we get poorer. And we all know the mess the Tories made during the pandemic. There was the PPE, the broken failed systems, and each and every one of them personally pocketed for that disaster. We need to put an end to all of that, because these people don't care about your NHS or us. They only care about themselves, and they will continue throwing curveballs until the NHS is completely unsustainable and it's gone and completely privatised. A wee bit about how that'll go. In America, if you need an ambulance, that's $5,000, £3,700. That's only your ambulance. Now, there's a wee story about an American boy who lost his job. He was insulin dependent, type 1 diabetic, couldn't afford his insulin, which was £1,200 a month. He's having to try and sustain his life on a £20 vial for Walmart. That's where we're going to end. The NHS was already on its knees before the pandemic. They were unable to fill the positions that were already there. And new staff are leaving in their droves, porters, healthcare workers, trained members of staff. The conditions for them and their patients are just continually unsafe and getting unsafer. Understaffed, well underpaid at 14.8% below inflation. That's like £20,000 below any other public sector worker. Yes, they gave us 4%, and on paper that looks really good, and on a good year that would be really good, but inflation is going up between 3.7 and 3.9%, so where is the rise to the workers for that? There's none, just like there hasn't been in over a decade. We're struggling to survive and we need the support of the people to make the NHS thrive again. Then there's the issues of the migrants. They're asking all the migrants to leave. The NHS is made up of a huge proportion of migrants. They send these migrants away who are phenomenal workers. And the NHS, if it doesn't collapse even quicker, it's going to collapse instantly when these people get sent away. We need to stop that too. We, as a grassroots team, got to meet Nicola Sturgeon a couple of weeks ago at the Govan Hill Festival. We got to tell her some of the issues surrounding the NHS from the inside and how could we go forward in protecting the NHS for the privatisation that's already happening. She said they will privatise the NHS over her dead body, and I believe her if it was up to her. But the power is not in her hands to protect that. Part of Scotland has already gone. She's agreed to meet us as a grassroots team to discuss these issues and how we go forward in protecting the NHS. So Nicola, if you're watching this, I really hope you are a woman of your word, because we're looking forward to this meeting with you. We need to stop the privatisation. We need to stop the underfunding. And we need to make the NHS a priority in recovering our wonderful country. Look where we're standing, in the middle of nuclear weapons that neither us nor our government want in our land. Sayre Alba.
Hi everybody. Just a wee announcement as well to interject with some of the speakers. On the 31st of August at 1 p.m, Now Scotland are holding a rally at the Scottish Parliament the first day back. Use the mandate, set the date. So if you can get along there for the Scottish Parliament 31st of August. How many mandates do they need? Time to set the date and hold another referendum. Okay, all under one banner is a broad-based united organisation with voices from different parts of the movement campaigning for independence. And I would like to invite Lorna McKinnon from the Socialist Workers' Party to come up and address the rally. Thank you, Lorna.
Yeah, I know. It's because I never had a step ladder.
I'm all right. Thanks so much. And I just want to follow on from where Brenda left it. That was a really fantastic speech, Brenda. £205 billion is what is spent on Trident. That's the most recent figure, £205 billion. That is disgraceful. And it's especially hard to stomach after we just heard from Brenda, when we think about the last couple of years that we've all just had, when we think about what that money could have been spent on. The Tories apparently have £205 billion to waste and throw away on Trident, but nothing for Afghan refugees. What else could we buy with £205 billion? That could buy us money for the NHS, pay rises for frontline workers, council housing. The fact that we're investing money in things like Trident instead of things like these, that tells us something about the system that we live under, the capitalist system that they represent. It tells us that we live in a society and a system that puts profit and war before people. And that's why it's so important that we're all here today, because what a blow that would be to the Tories and their system if we broke up the British state with independence and started building a society that puts people before profit and war. A society without nuclear weapons. But what about the problems that we're facing closer to home? There's now a pro-independence majority with the SNP and the Greens alliance. So what does that mean for us in reality? Well, whether it's getting rid of Trident, fighting to address climate change, or achieving a second referendum, the Tories are blocking all of these things. And it's not good enough then for the Scottish Government to hide behind that. If they are serious about climate change and scrapping Trident, if they are serious about a second referendum, they have to defy the Tories. They have to disobey them and push forward. Yes. And if they're not ready to do that, then the pressure is going to have to come from somewhere else. It's going to have to come from us. We have to see more of what we've achieved today, people out on the streets, militant action, mass mobilisation, and take the fight to their doorstep and force them to face the music. Because if history's taught us anything, it's that any rights that we do have, they have had to be fought for. The women's vote, women's right to vote, the civil rights movement. Rights from these struggles were never handed down to us. They were fought for and won by ordinary people who demanded them. So we have to take inspiration from those struggles, I think, and demand the same here. And the last thing that I want to say is, in a world that's so deeply in crisis, we can't just postpone these changes that we want, postpone these struggles until after independence. Because it's not inevitable that independence will make a better society. It's about what we make of independence. It's about what kind of society we want to live in. And we're going to have to fight for that society. And that's why we can't wait. And it's why we have to fight in the here and now against racism, for the rights of migrants and refugees. We have to fight for radical action on climate change in the lead up to COP26. We have to fight for trans rights. And we have to say no to war and no to nuclear weapons. Thanks very much.
Okay, I'm going to invite Alan Bell from Now Scotland to come up and address the rally now. Come on, Alan.
Hi everyone. It's good to see everybody here today. I know it's not as big as some people would have liked it to be, but we've got to remember that we are building a movement from the grassroots up again. And how many people are here today? Let's say roughly 200. The next demonstration is going to be bigger than that. The next demonstration is going to be bigger than that. So we're not going to be disheartened by anything like that. So what we're here today to talk about is we're standing outside Faslane nuclear base. As the last speaker said, £205 billion wasted on abhorrent nuclear weapons that only have the capability of mass destruction. These are not a deterrent. We saw what happened in Nagasaki and Hiroshima. We saw the destruction that was caused. We've seen what happens when a nuclear power plant in Japan got hit by a tidal wave a few years ago and the destruction to people's lives that caused. We don't need to spend the money on this. As speakers have said before, we want to take that money, we want to spend it on our NHS. We want to welcome refugees into this country. Look at the legacy of Afghanistan. We are part of that British legacy, so we need to break up the British state. We say no more nuclear weapons. We say welcome refugees into this country. We say build a better Scotland. We say support the NHS. We say make a welcoming country. We say stand against the Tories' climate of the hostile climate and climate of fear. If you've caused them refugees and migrants, you should be welcoming them to this nation. And today we stand outside Faslane, but I call for you, come on Tuesday outside the Parliament at 1 o'clock and call for them to set the date. And then from there, the next thing we need to do is we need to march to Dungavel, because that's an absolute shame to have that in our country. They said they would do something about it, but the government has done nothing over Dungavel. So we need to march there and say, we will not stand for people to be detained in our country who haven't committed any crimes other than being born in the wrong place. So I ask everyone here today, and this is a shameless plug, I'm from Now Scotland. Join Now Scotland. We're a grassroots, one-member, one-vote organisation, building from the ground up, because we need to win our independence. And we're not going to wait for a year. We're not going to wait for 5 years. We're going to do it now. We're asking to set the date next year, set the date the year after that maybe, but it has to come as quick as possible, because it will not come in 5 years from now. No chance to wait for things to happen. We've seen how the climate emergency has totally destroyed the country and it's destroying the world. And we need to realise and convince other people who have said that that's not part of the independence movement, that it's central to the independence movement. Because if we destroy the planet, we'll have nowhere to live and there'll be no point to independence. The last thing I'm going to say is we're fighting for a better Scotland. There's no point for independence for the sake of it, and that's why we're here outside Faslane. We're saying break up the British state. get independence now, fight for a better Scotland, a more socialist Scotland, a welcoming country, and a country where we can have the democratic right to make the decisions that we voted for in our own parliament. So one last time, I'll say, join Now Scotland today. We need to realise the movement is slightly fractured, but I don't buy into any of that. There's no fractures for me. There's one case. The case is independence, and the case is to win it now.
Now introducing Tim Rideout from the Scottish Currency Group. Welcome.
Okay, thank you. In order to remove the disaster waiting to happen behind us, we obviously need independence. And that means winning the support of a majority of Scottish voters. The SNP leadership, and Mike Russell in particular at the moment, have things the wrong way round. There's no point campaigning without answers to the questions that the voters ask. So what I'm just going to do very briefly is I'm going to go through the main questions. I've been doing talks for 2 years, so I know what people ask. So firstly, let's take the easy one, pensions. The existing state pension is the lowest in Europe. And on independence, the Scottish Government should take that over, turn it into the Scottish Universal Pension, and implement existing SNP policy, which is to increase that to the EU average of £300 per week per person. What happens to private pensions? Well, nothing happens on independence. You have a contract with a pension provider, your employer, the insurance company, or whatever. So those will stay exactly the same. The question about the European Union. Well, there's a lot of nonsense talked about the European Union. It is simply not possible to just rejoin the European Union by saying, right, we want to rejoin and we'll be in tomorrow, because we won't. Brussels will be very kind. They will fall over backwards to help us, but fast for Brussels means the negotiations will take 4 years. That would be a record for an accession. They're not going to bend the rules because Spain would not like that. The other applicants wouldn't like it. So the answer to the question, what do we do about the EU, is after independence, we have a referendum on whether people wish to apply to rejoin the EU. And I think the answer to that will be yes, which will trigger the 4 years of negotiations. In the meantime, what we can do on Independence Day is to join EFTA and get into the Norway position, which puts us back in Erasmus, back in the single market. It may well turn out that that would be the best position in the long run. The negotiations with the EU are not straightforward. We have the tricky issue of fish, for example. The EU requires 5% VAT on food and children's clothes and things like that, which we may not want to do. So long as we're in the EFTA position in the single market, that restores the ease of access to the EU, cures the trade problems. On the border with England, well, it's blatantly obvious that whatever ends up being the border between Northern Ireland and England will be exactly the same as the border between Scotland and England. So you don't need to panic about it. We'll still be in the common travel areas. There'll be no customs, no passport controls. You can move freely. You don't need a work permit to work in England. Goods are going to be subject to some checks, unfortunately. That is the UK's choice. It's not our doing, it's theirs. And obviously on my particular subject, currency. There's only one answer to this question, and that is we have our own currency as soon as possible. That means, for Andrew Wilson's benefit, a couple of months after Independence Day. I've got some of it here, which, when we were still able to do talks face-to-face, we could get the whole room to bring along some sterling and change it into the Scottish currency and then spend it at the bar or buy some of my maps. It's really not very difficult. If you want to find out more about the currency question, have a look at the reservebank.scot website. But it's basically very straightforward. We have something like 200 billion of sterling, which belongs to us and our companies, government, council and so forth. We have about 130 billion of sterling debts, which we will probably repay. So that will be 200 billion coming into the Scottish pound, 130 billion going out to settle the old debts.
That leaves the Scottish Reserve Bank holding 70 billion of foreign reserves, which was our sterling that we handed in. So anyone who says we have to go and save for 10 years to build up foreign reserves is talking out their rear end, because we don't. It's automatic. Anyone who wants to know more about currency, then, as I say, you can email me through the Reserve Bank website, or you can join the Scottish Currency Group on Facebook. So, lastly, in terms of the Scottish Government and the civil service, at the moment we only have 7,000 civil servants in the Scottish Government. Denmark has 50,000 core civil service positions. So that suggests that we are going to need a lot more civil servants to man the Ministry of Defence, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Finance, and all of these sort of things. I estimate something like 35,000 new jobs, and I've proposed, although I think we're going to have to wait for the November SNP conference, that those new jobs be allocated proportional to the population of each council area, with a 20% or more premium for any council which is currently deprived, rural or remote. So that would be, say, Inverclyde or Dumfries and Galloway or the Western Isles. You know, in the case of Dumfries and Galloway, that would mean 2,000 civil service jobs going to that area. So that's something of direct, concrete benefit to voters. They can see that that's going to be maybe a job for them, a job for one of their family, suppliers, contracts, all that sort of thing. So, independence means that everything changes, including what's behind us. So, what I would say to our MPs and the First Minister, tell people that. Don't try pretending that nothing's going to change and it all just stays much the same. Because if that's the case, there's no point having independence. Everyone instinctively knows that it's going to change, that we are going to have to change the currency, that other things are going to change. We're going to shake up land ownership. We're going to shake up the Defence Force. All of those sort of things. So just tell people, be honest up front. They know it's going to happen. Sell it as hope and opportunity. And I think we can then easily win the referendum. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Tim. Our next speaker is Daniel Mwangi, climate change activist and anti-war activist. On you go, Daniel. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Daniel, and I'm with Stand Up to Racism, and we see that it's most crucial right now to build the anti-racist movement by tying in the anti-war movement for an independent Scotland free of nuclear arms. Nuclear weapons had first been developed as a 20th century Hail Mary that could wipe out inferior races, a fantasy enacted in Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945, like Alan mentioned earlier. It was only the 75th anniversary of marking that catastrophic humanitarian consequence of nuclear weapons earlier this month. Not only are the warlords in the British government in favor of nuclear arms, but they're actively making the decision to fund more nuclear weapons. As of 2020, the United Kingdom announced that it would increase its nuclear arsenal, and right now, with Brexit, the desire to re-emerge as a global Britain will mean shooting down any action on disarmament. Boris Johnson himself has openly shut down attempts of an independent Scotland that insists on the removal of nuclear weapons. This is why we must fight. This is why these people have no understanding of the human cost of nuclear weapons and war, because they're never on the receiving end of the bombings, and they're never on the front lines like our brothers and sisters sent to war, coming back home broken. And we can be a real thorn in the side of British imperialism to stop these ghouls in office who are building up the Trident program as we speak. It must be our fight to take this off their hands, and this could probably result in there being no nuclear weapons in Scotland and hopefully Britain. When Tony Blair was in office, he was a cheerleader for the Iraq and the invasion of Afghanistan wars combined. And this was all built on lies, and we know that millions died. He's a war criminal, no doubt. We can't let these goons get away with talking about defense using warheads that cost billions to maintain, while they can't even defend our neighbors in this country against destitution, debt, poverty, homelessness, and illness. Right now, the Tories are spinning arguments against refugees coming to Britain, refugees who flee from the aftermath of Western intervention, and they claim that there's no room or not enough money to take them all in. That's nonsense. But these claims are false. Britain officially spent some £22 billion on the Afghan war, and other estimates put the figure at £40 billion. If there's money for military intervention, then there's money to welcome those who are made refugees by these wars. And there's money to support them, rather than forcing asylum seekers to survive on £5.69 per day. We've been lied to for the last 20 years, guys. We've seen the spillover effects, both humanitarian and economic costs. These wars were sold to us under the pretext of making us safer here at home. But obviously, these are lies to justify intervention. These wars aren't taken to foreign lands to help nation building, finding WMDs, or improving on human rights. The real weapons of mass destruction are right beyond these gates, guys. Let's fight for an independent and sovereign Scotland that follows the will of the people and not the warlords. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Daniel. We now have David Henry of the Scottish Sovereign Research Group.
Didn't think that was going to work. Well, it's a pleasure to be with you. I joined the SNP just over 7 years ago and sadly left a few months ago after being disillusioned with no movement on independence. Since then, and during then, I joined a group which is now called the Scottish Sovereignty Research Group, a group of approximately 12 individuals, including 3 professors, all with experts in the Constitution. We presented to ALBA and to the SNP for the last election a manifesto for Indy, which was a simple 10-point plan based in law and effectively laid out a 10-piece process over a 2-year period. The one thing that seemed to be missing, we don't actually need a referendum. We've never needed a referendum. Scotland's sovereignty was established in 892 AD. I learned this from one of the professors. It's been reaffirmed many times since. What we do need is to present to the public and to voters a plan that makes sense. Over a period of time, over 2 years, we believe we should announce Scotland's sovereignty through the Scottish Parliament. That could be done now. Brexit changed everything. Brexit was against the will of the Scottish people. 62% of Scots voted Remain. They were ignored. There's been some great points made today, including a couple. We talk about a referendum. We disagree. You do need a referendum, but you don't need it at the beginning of the process. Ideally, what you do is you have it at the end, where you've told everybody exactly what the future holds. And then people vote. They either wish to continue to be independent or they decide to rejoin England. And we all know what that does. So the Scottish Sovereignty Research Group will publish a number of well thought through policy papers. We have professors from all over the world. We've been in touch with other countries. There is a ready and willingness to recognise Scotland's sovereignty and our independence. We just need the politicians to be able to stand up and take the difficult decision and make it happen. I believe what you're about to find out is the real cost of Brexit. I did a little bit of research on nuclear weapons. The current running costs of Trident is £1.6 billion per year. Scotland sends to the UK government £3.5 billion for defence. Only £1 billion of that is spent here in Scotland. We are subsidising the UK. The talk of a pension. I voted at the SNP conference in favour of raising the minimum pension, which of course it should be. It is quite correct. The UK has the worst, lowest state pension in the whole of Europe. It is not a success. It's a failure. How can we afford to increase the state pension is the question I had. And so I researched it. After independence, we won't be spending £3.5 billion a year on UK defence. We won't be spending £3.2 billion a year paying UK national debt, which, by the way, is now well past £1 trillion. So it's not a success either. You add up the savings, you can easily afford Scotland to have a state pension in line with the EU average. And it's true, rejoining the EU cannot be done quickly, but EFTA can. EFTA will get you the start of single market access, EFTA, EEA membership, and then at the end of the day we can present what deal Europe is offering. And then it goes to a referendum where we can tell you exactly what the future is going to look like, or we can be run from London. Visit our website, manifestoforindy.com. You can download the documents, and we're engaging with all yes groups. Thank you very much.
Thanks to David for that. Our final speaker today is Ian Ramsey from the Society and League of Celtic Nations.
They keep all the big stars to the last. I was a person that painted the slogans down at the Holy Loch, telling the Americans to go home, we didn't need their nuclear weapons. And I'll tell you something, the British state at the time said, oh, we've made tests and there's nothing to worry about. Nothing to worry about. And of course, the local fishing fleet here, because I'm from across the river here in Greenock, and we had a fishing fleet, and they warned me, I was a candidate for the SNP at the time, they said, everything has died in the Holy Loch. All the shellfish, all the sea life has died. And this was what the British state was saying, oh no, no, everything's okay, no, everything's okay, no, don't worry about it. And it was their word against the fishermen's word. Until the American retired, who was in the Hunley, the first sister ship that came across, he retired. Some people say he became a born-again Christian, and he therefore confessed that he had dumped nuclear material into the loch. And there was a dredger sat there for nearly 2 years getting all this crap out of the water. And Mr. Donald Duck Commander, the man at the other side of this fence here, he's also dumping strontium-90 and tritium and a whole lot of other things that's hard to pronounce but is worse to take. What a cocktail he's putting into the water. And he said it's going to be 5 times more when the new submarine arrives. But he said it's perfectly acceptable. I ask him, who's it acceptable to? Certainly not to us. We have asked for test after test. They used to take tests down by Hunterston, where I want the test. There's a little open-air swimming pool right across the river here, where our children are jumping about, enjoying themselves in the water. That strontium-90 or whatever crap they call it is going to eventually go into that pool and give those children juvenile cancer. So what I'm saying to you, if you're listening, Mr. Commandant, Donald Duck or Donald Dewar or whatever your bloody name is, I will personally pay for your children to go into that swimming pool. If you say there's nothing to worry about, I will send us over a minibus full of your children and your grandchildren and all the other officers' children, and I will pay for them into the swimming pool if it's so safe. That's my challenge. Send your children, but I don't think you will, because you are hiding the fact that personnel on your side of the fence there are being retired off and being given good backhanders who have contacted cancer. including 3 young submarine sailors who took testicular cancer. Now, this is being hidden from us. We want you to be straight and honest and tell us the truth. Scotland must have independence before we can get rid of you. That's obvious. I was for many years in Africa working, and I saw what the British state did before the First World War. And I have a photograph here of the concentration camps that the British invented. And I stood there, and as far as the eye can see, in a town called Krugersdorp in present-day South Africa, 23,000 women and children buried in graves because General Buller and Kitchener could not beat the Boer army, so they invented the concentration camp. And the Union Jack was what flew above those camps. Make no mistake about it. And that's when the British Empire started to fail, because they made war on women and children. And don't make no mistake about it, there's still plenty of dirty tricks up their sleeve. This is a target obtained from the KGB headquarters in Moscow. It's a red alert, and it shows Greenock and Helensburgh as being the target for the Russian retaliatory strikes. So we're living right in the middle of a bullseye. So if you're losing a bit of sleep, it's understandable, because you're living in a bullseye on a target which had been created, and London accepted it and gave it to us, gave it to Scotland, put it in the lesser populated area, they said. This is the most populated valley, the Clyde and Forth Valley, and the westerly prevailing wind would take fallout within 20 minutes to Glasgow. When I was in the army, I volunteered. I was only a stupid boy at 19, and I volunteered to go to Christmas Island. Christmas Island was where the British state were trying out the bomb. And all my pals, who have since died, were standing there with only a wee pair of shorts on and a pair of sunglasses, and to watch this explosion, which was only 11 miles away. But nobody had told them about nuclear fallout and radiation. Every one of my friends that went to that posting, and I was stupid enough to put my name on the list, and thank goodness I didn't get chosen. Every one of them died before they were 50. And they try to say that nuclear bombs or nuclear power is okay. Have they forgotten about Chernobyl? All the little children that have died since that used to play at Chernobyl. And you notice, of course, Chernobyl wasn't in Russia. Russia had built Chernobyl when they were in charge of the Ukraine. Just the same as London, England accepts. And by the way, it's a case of, how would I say, they don't care about us. There's absolutely no way that they care about us. We must have independence and take our country forward. Alapagubra.
Hi folks, Ian was our last speaker. We're going to get Lorna to sing a few tunes just to play us out, but I just want to end up by thanking everybody for coming today. I think it's been a successful rally. I think it's an important message that we've sent out today. Remember the slogan, bairns not bombs, welfare and education, not trident and deportation. You know, these are the messages, the positive messages we want to send out. A couple of announcements I need to make. Remember the Now Scotland rally at the Scottish Parliament on the 31st at 11 AM. But all under one banner are taken to the streets again. September 11th in Stirling. We're actually marching this time, so look forward to seeing you there. In September the 25th in Edinburgh. Hopefully we'll get there in big numbers. On the streets marching again. So, Lorna, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to do a couple of anti-war tunes by one of my heroes, Alistair Hewlett, a fantastic revolutionary socialist and political singer-songwriter. So this first one is called Don't Sign Up for War, and following on from Neil's songs earlier, it's about John McClain, the accuser of capitalism. So. Okay, I'm going to try again. See Don Arthur Henderson, he'd bum a roll the working men. When war broke out, he pressed a suit, he ran to catch the train. He signed a deal in London, nae more strikes until the fighting's done. In Glasgow to the word went round, tack 10 to John McClain. Here's the chorus. He said, I've been at that's a weapon, we a working man at either end. Betray your country, serve your class, and don't sign up for war, my friend, don't sign up for war. They turned him out at Langside Hall, he stood up at the fountain. What he said was tailor-made to magnify the friction. Ye patriots can roar and bond out, but braggart's fiction. The only war worth fighting for is a war against oppression. He said, a bayonet, that's a weapon, we a working man at either end. Betray your country, serve your class, and don't sign up for war, my friend, don't sign up for war. The Polish sweet him out there and down to Queen's Park Station. Tell him plain offend again and we'll make you rue the day, son. Then he didn't turn a hair, he called a demonstration. A mighty throng, 10,000 strong, turned out against conscription. And the next time they came for him, John Kent, that they meant business. He didn't plead for mercy, he said, give me British justice. The justice that he called for stand many empty silence. When out of hell the hammer fell, and 3 years was the sentence. What did he say? He said, a bayonet, that's a weapon, we a working man at either end. Betray your country, serve your class, don't sign up for war, my friend, don't sign up for war. Clamour to release McLean reached fever pitch in Merman. In a year and a half they called it off, but Christ attacked them, sir man. He came back older for his time, he didn't seem to care, man. Day all you can, I'm still the one who caused you to be weird, man. I've been at that's a weapon, we a working man at either end. Betray your country, serve your class, and don't sign up for war, my friend, don't sign up for war. Don't sign up for war, my friend, don't sign up for war. If there's time, I want to ask another hero of mine, my big sister, to come up and sing a song about one of our heroes, Mary Barber. And it's also a song by Alistair Hewlett called Mary Barber's Army. So also going out in an anti-war number. Just then. Ready? In the tenements, and you have to sing along as well. In the tenements of Glasgow in the year 1915, it was one long bloody struggle to keep ourselves alive. We were counting up the coppers just to buy our scraps of food.
when the landlords put their rent up just because they could. Oh, the factories were humming, there was overtime galore, but the wages they were driven down to subsidise the war. Ookie Mary Barber, we're her wee bit single, and she said they'll organise the lassies if I can't rouse them in, 'cause I'm fi govern, and you're fi Partick. This year's fi Bradshaw, we're in John's fi Kennan Park. There's some of us broads, there's some of us Catholics. We're Mrs. Barber's army and we're here to do the work. Mary Barber made a poster saying we'll no pay higher rent, then chopped on every door of every governed tenement. Put this in the windy when you hear me bang the drum. We'll come out and chase the factor all the way to Kingdom Come. When the poor wee soul came round, he was battered black and blue by your regiments and pennies that knew just what to do. Mrs. Barber organised the gathering of the clans, and they burst out of the steamy, armed with pots and frying pans, 'cause I'm fi govern,
You say along,
and you're fi Partick. This year's fi Bradshaw, we're in John's fi Kennan Park. There's some of us prods, there's some of us Catholics, but we're Mrs. Barber's army and we're here to do the work. Miss Barber's army spread through Glasgow like the plague. The maesters got the message and the message was nae. While our men will fight the Kaiser, we'll stay home and fight the war against the greedy bastards who keep grinding down the poor. So if you want to stop conscription, stand and fight the profiteers. Bring a hail big bloody Sanskrit crashing down our in their ears. We'll no starve, said Mrs. Barber, while the men we call worry are marching after see their hearts blood wash like water down the tree. 'Cause I'm fi govern, and you're fi Partick. This year's fi Bradshaw, we're in Don's fi Kennan Park. There's some of us prods, there's some of us Catholics, but we're Mrs. Barber's army and we're here to do the work. Well, it didn't take the government that long to realise if you crack down on the leaders, then the rest will compromise. They arrested Mary Barber and they clapped her in the jail, but they made an awfully big mistake, they let her out on bail. She caught the men out of the factories on the Clyde and on the cart. They marched up to the courthouse saying we'll tear the place apart. Mrs. Barber's army brought the maesters to their knees. We are regiment and pennies backed by one in dungarees. 'Cause I'm fi govern, and you're fi Partick. This year's fi Bradshaw, we're in John's fi Kennan Park. There's some of us prods, there's some of us Catholics, but we're Mrs. Barber's army and we're here to do the work. Mrs. Barber's army and we're here to do the work.
Okay, folks, that's it. Safe home. Thanks for coming. Hope to see you again soon. Thank you.
This year's fi Bradshaw, we're in John's fi Kennan Park. There's some of us prods, there's some of us Catholics, but we're Mrs. Barber's army and we're here to do the work.